Hi, Paul here. Making this video in the midst of the coronavirus lockdown. So you got a little extra time on your hands and also a lot of time to think. And you're probably thinking too on the whole subject of suffering and hardship and difficulties in life in general. And what do we make of that? Well, I've done some thinking, some writing, some speaking on the subject of suffering in the past. And I wanted to share a quick video with you on it on that subject, specifically from the frame of reference of how, as a theist, somebody who believes in God and acknowledges God's existence, how do we see suffering, and how does that differ from how an atheist might see suffering? And of those two, which view kind of holds up best when you consider the fact that the world's got a lot of hardship in it, a lot of difficult things happen. So how do the two kind of compare? To get into the subject, a good starting point is to start with agreement. When you have two sides that don't agree on everything, to start with, well, what do we agree on? I think we can all agree, especially in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, I think we can all agree that the world has hardship, it has difficulty, it has suffering. There's things that go on that we don't like, that are just wrong, and we all have to contend with that, and we all have to somehow or other make sense of it. So I think we can agree, atheists and theists alike can agree, yeah, there's a lot of hardship in the world, a lot of things that are wrong. That's then where things go sideways, because the atheists will look at everything that's wrong with the world, and they'll say, well, why doesn't God fix it? If there really is a God out there, if there really is this loving being out there who controls everything and is powerful, why doesn't he do something about it? Why doesn't he fix it? And the theists have a quandary on their hands, have a mystery and a paradox, and I don't want to undermine that in any way. But what I think gets overlooked oftentimes in the conversation is that the atheists have their own very specific challenge, very specific problem that they have to deal with respect to the fact that there's suffering and hardship in the world. Because what I just said that we can all agree on is that there are things in the world that are not the way they should be. It's just that the world's broken, the world's just corrupt. There's difficulties that are just, it's not right. Something is just not right in the world, and that seems to be something that you talk to just about any human and we can agree on. That there's definitely something in the world that's not right. That's not the way it should be, and not just in small ways, really big ways like coronavirus, really big issues. But then that raises the question: if we're going to talk about the fact that the world is not how it should be, it very naturally raises the question: well, what should it be like? What should the world be like? Which actually raises another very interesting related question: how do you know that's what the world should be like? Anytime we talk about the fact that things are not the way they should be, just built right into that conversation is the assumption, the idea that there is a way that the world should be. Because we can only talk about that it should not be like this if we know, well, it should be like this other thing. And that's where I think you're going to have, atheists that are in the conversation are going to have a problem, because you need to have that design, that template, that blueprint for all of reality in order to say that something's wrong with reality as it is. But where in the world does that exist? Where in the world is such a template or blueprint, and who came up with it? To give you an example here, I was just trying to think of a couple of examples to try and illustrate the point. Imagine that you're going to, your friend picks you up and he's going to take you to some kind of a party of some kind. Obviously, that's not happening during coronavirus, but imagine your friend picks you up to take you to some kind of a party, and he puts a blindfold on and doesn't tell you where you're going. It's going to be this big surprise. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you're driving for a while, and then if, let's say, 20 minutes into the drive, you say, well, something's wrong, we should be there by now. That makes no sense. It would make no sense because you don't know where you're going, and you're blindfolded. You don't know where you are. So you can't, you have nothing outside of yourself as a reference point to compare, where you are and where you're going, in order to say, well, if something's wrong, we should be there by now. It would be a nonsensical statement, and people just, look at what are you talking about? It makes no sense for you to say that. Or to give another quick example, my kids love making food prep. One time my son was making some cookies, and he loves food prep. He's good at it, but he was still learning, and somehow or other, some of the ingredients got mixed up, and we tasted the dough, and that is not what cookie dough is supposed to taste like. But we know that that's not what cookie dough is supposed to taste like for two reasons. One, because we've tasted it before. We've actually had some engagement with, we've had the experience of what it is supposed to be like, but also because there's a recipe. We can go to the recipe and we can look and see, oh, whoops, you put in extra flour, not enough sugar. So yeah, you know what? It's going to taste a little funny. The only way that we can actually make any kind of statement that says something's wrong is if we know what it's supposed to be like. We have some kind of a reference point, some kind of data that says this is what it's supposed to be like. And it's really hard, I would say, on atheists' view to say, well, this is what the world should be like. Because on an atheist view, it just is what it is. I mean, how many times have we heard that there's this cosmic Big Bang, there's this evolution thing, and it just came to be whatever it came to be. It just is what it is. There's no design, no purpose, no direction, no vision, no goal. So it's almost like being that guy in the car is blindfolded, but not only do you not know where you're going, you don't actually have a destination in mind. There is no set destination. They're just going to kind of randomly show up somewhere. You can't, in that sense, if they show up in some random place, say, well, this isn't the right place. Well, there never was a right place. It's just purely unguided, uncoordinated, undesigned randomness. And on atheism, then that's the world we find ourselves in. That's the world that we find ourselves in if atheism is correct. So if atheism is correct, then to look around at the world where we find ourselves and say, well, this isn't right, something's wrong, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So you can't actually speak of the suffering and the hardship in the world and say God should do something about it because something's wrong with the world, because there isn't a right way the world is. Now, the theists, on the other hand, we have our own challenge, because we, from a belief in God, from an understanding that there is a God out there, he created this world and that he had an idea about what it should look like. We have a basis, we have that external reference point that I was talking about, where we can say there is something wrong with the world. We can say that with some confidence because we have that external reference. We have, even just philosophy. We have the Bible as well, more specifically, so general and specific revelation. We've got a number of reasons why we can point to, yes, there is something wrong with the world. We've got the problem of trying to understand why there's something wrong with the world. Why did God allow this to continue in the way that he did, instead of setting it up, perfectly in the first place and making sure it stayed perfect all the way along? So we've got a mystery to deal with, and I don't want to downplay that, and I don't want to pretend that it's not that big a deal. In fact, I wrote a whole book about it, and I've done some public speaking on it. I find it a very interesting subject. But between the two, you've got the atheists who are saying there's something wrong with the world, but logically that just doesn't work. It's an incoherent view. Or you've got the theists who will say there is something wrong with the world and it's logically coherent, but you've got a problem. You've got a mystery, a paradox on your hand. So both of those views have a problem, if you will, dealing with what's wrong with the world. But between the two, I don't know. I guess from a theistic point of view, I'd rather be on the side that at least has the logical coherence associated with it. And then now we can wrestle through the question of the mystery, the paradox. Why in the world does God let that happen? So anyway, just a short little thought, something for you to stew over as everyone was locked down in coronavirus, and hopefully you're all keeping nice and safe and healthy.